You know you love the story so far. Like and subscribe.
Chapter 22, Human Factor. I immersed myself in training with every free minute I had, reading the classified system manuals or refining my reactions in the flight simulator, as Frey had suggested. Even other personnel with sufficient clearance, meaning Frey had authorized their access, scheduled time in the simulator. The greatest innovation in operation and flight training was the G-force simulator Lewis suggested. While it functioned as a conditioning tool for potential pilots, others adopted it as a form of challenge. Crathen especially gravitated toward the device to prove their endurance. As a result of pushing past their limits, at least one person a week was admitted to the growing infirmary. After 2 months of treating what she called inertia sickness, Shrifa sought permission to conduct medical research on the correlation between excessive inertia and its physiological effects on both humans and Crathen. Once her growing team published their first report, engineering teams adjusted the inertia systems on ships in current development and upgraded existing systems. Advanced android constructs were soon fabricated, packed with sensors and materials replicating the body systems of both species. 6 months after Shrifa's initial tests, Shay and I were summoned for a meeting with Trin Hess. We walked into a meeting where the entire leadership from our compound was in attendance. Trin Hess's holographic image materialized in the center of the table. I have reviewed the reports Mashri has submitted on inertia sickness. Am I to understand you have used both Crathen and humans as experimental subjects? Chief Markham almost laughed, but quickly disguised it as a cough when Letra shot him a warning glance. I saw Markham wasn't the only one struggling to hide his amusement. The other humans in attendance either covered their mouths to conceal their humor or contorted their faces with barely controlled laughter. Even Frey and a couple of other Crathen strained to conceal their amusement. I brushed my hand over my mouth and my newly grown beard to compose myself before responding. Good evening, Trinhez. We have not exactly experimented on our personnel. What began as treatment for training injuries prompted Shrifa to investigate their cause. I outlined the origin of the G-force simulator and how it progressed to our current developmental status. Both Shrifa and Lewis clarified or confirmed my appraisal. The doctor assured the fleet admiral of the medical oversight being applied, while Lewis detailed the potential benefits. My own engineers are concerned with the long-term medical implications, Trin has stated. Their own simulations question the tactical value of this research. What your engineers lack is the human factor, Shay interjected proudly. They also lack the competitive drive we apply. I believe a comparative test might be needed, Frey suggested. We have 3 prototype fighters ready for testing. We could devise a combat test simulation between the current models and ours. Her expression wasn't quite neutral, but bordered on challenging. The Admiral studied her for a moment before returning his attention to Shay and me. Will your craft be available for testing within 1 seasonal orbit? I glanced at Frey, who flicked her ears in acknowledgement. We will be ready within 3 Earth months, I replied, more confidently than I felt. The holographic image vanished a half-second later. I rubbed the bridge of my nose in frustration. How soon will we be ready? I asked finally. We will be ready, Frey answered confidently. I want human Crathen pairs piloting these craft, Shay ordered surprisingly. We must convince our people that we can work together. She looked pointedly at Mashri. I would respectfully request all data specify contributing individuals in the future be presented to our leadership first. Mashri nodded. As you request, Miktar. She scanned the room with a warning gaze until each person submitted. I would like to see the new advancements demonstrated, down to the individual science. It took 2 days to prepare the demonstrations ordered. Shay had commissioned demonstrations on every piece of new technology developed. The first showcased the integration of Crathen, self-repairing nanites with human-designed high-entropy alloys. Dr. Simmons explained how alloys such as chromium, cobalt, and nickel, when combined in appropriate proportions, produced an alloy superior to titanium and at a significant reduction in weight. When combined with nanites and subjected to the extremely cold vacuum of space, its strength and durability increased tenfold. The demonstration was simple. Our most advanced instruments would measure each shot. Latra prepared the first energy test once the targets were ready. It took 3 focused shots with the energy cannon loaned to us by Mashri to penetrate the Crathen alloy. The high-entropy alloy withstood 4. Each target was then subjected to temperatures comparative to space. Again, the Crethan alloy failed after 3 shots. The hybrid alloy, impregnated with nanites, only began to crack after 7 sustained shots. The test served not only to demonstrate the combined innovation, but also to gather conclusive data. The test was reproduced the following day, except this time it occurred in the true vacuum of space. 2 drones launched into a head-to-head fight. One followed a Crethan design, while the other was a mix of both species. Latra and Frey pitted themselves against each other from their respective control terminals on the Predator's Hope. The result was the same. The hybrid alloy triumphed easily. We did not return to the planet after the test. Frey and Lewis were expected to demonstrate the latest fighter against the most modern available on the cruiser. Each would be timed and graded on their maneuverability through the ever-changing asteroid belt. They would be required to dodge colliding asteroids while remaining inside a tight, predetermined navigational path. Each crew member would have their vitals monitored closely throughout for any potential emergencies and to compile stress data exerted on the body. Moshri selected his best pilots for the challenge. The least experienced of them had been piloting fighters for over 6 years. The fighter captain was the wing commander herself, with almost 15 years of experience. The Crethan team managed the course in an impressive time, barely remaining within the course boundaries. Frey and Lewis had less than 3 months of experience in the experimental fighter being tested. Neither had flown it in space beyond its maiden flight. Shay and I exchanged nervous glances as we watched them move through the complex system checks on the cockpit camera. Unlike the first fighter, the hybrid known as Misfit hummed to life rather than whining. The timer began when Lewis launched the craft like a bullet out of the launch bay. To the naked eye, it was there one moment and gone in a blink. Everyone watched both the medical monitors and the flight trajectory with anticipation. Lewis's vitals were significantly elevated, but still within safety limits, while Frey's breathing and heart rate matched that of a moderate running pace. Muscle memory developed over recent months played a significant role in their performance as the fighter banked sharply around moving obstacles. Twice impacts were registered against the hull. The second was more significant than the last as they maneuvered between 2 colliding asteroids large enough to crush the fragile vessel like a tin can. The resulting collision sent alarms sounding throughout the cabin as the ship momentarily vented atmosphere. Both Frey and Lewis ignored the danger, instead trusting the nanites to do their job. The Misfit crossed the finish line 64 ticks faster than the first. They also stayed well inside the navigational boundaries. The fighter settled gently onto the flight deck with a dull metallic impact of landing struts against steel. The hull was a mosaic of scratches and tears, still noticeably undergoing nanite repair, as we all watched in real time. Frey and Lewis emerged a few minutes later, carrying their helmets. Frey looked exhausted despite her calm expression. Lewis sweated profusely, his usual dark skin flushed a light gray. They performed well beyond expectations, despite their lack of piloting experience compared to their challengers. Return to Earth was delayed due to safety concerns over the damage sustained during flight. Dr. Simmons and his team insisted on inspecting the craft for vulnerabilities that might jeopardize the hull integrity during re-entry. Nobody objected. Shay and I were content spending time on the observation deck with Chiari, who excitedly pointed out distant stars, asking us their names as if we would know such mysteries. It took a week before Dr. Simmons completed his detailed hull assessment of the Misfit and declared it safe for re-entry. He explained that while the hull strengthened in cold vacuum, he held concerns over the superheating of the ship during the return flight. Frey had argued against his logic, claiming the forward energy shielding and the shallow angle of forced re-entry negated such concerns, to no avail. Even Shay refused to go against Dr. Simmons on the issue, stating there was no hurry or tactical need to risk the ship and its crew. The glide angle on the return minimized the strain on the hull, but the descent lit up the ship like a dim meteor, prompting the deployment of multiple intercept aircraft from several countries. It was all in vain, however, since once the fighter was through the stratosphere, it vanished from radar and was well away from any intercept path before anyone could make contact. Once on the ground, Simmons and his team dismantled the outer hull plating and replaced them with the obsidian, light-absorbing panels. The next 3 months passed in a blur of activity as training intensified for the planned combat maneuvers. Even Shay and I underwent rigorous drills meant to familiarize ourselves with the controls and maneuverability. Shay proved to be leagues ahead of me when it came to piloting the craft. her reflexes sharpened due to her natural senses. I, on the other hand, was adept at manipulating the control switches from what had become muscle memory. In a best-case scenario, I made the obvious choice for her co-pilot. When I broached the idea with Frey, she crossed her arms and simply said, "No," with a tone that left no room for argument. Neither Shay nor I would be allowed to participate in any combat operations, simulated or otherwise. The simulated combat went about as well as we expected. The experimental fighters emerged victorious, with only one being flagged as too disabled to continue. The computer deemed it had taken too many direct hits during what the human pilot had referred to as a game of chicken, meant to force the other pilot to veer wildly. The ploy had worked, and the more experienced pilot was eliminated by Leitra and his human co-pilot, who flew close behind their wingman, using him as a shield. The fight was over within less than 30 minutes. Once the wing commander was out of the equation, the other two vessels were eliminated in short order. Only after the contest had been ruled on were all ships resurrected. In all fairness, the one hybrid craft that had been eliminated had only been disabled, not destroyed. Shay and I kept our expressions neutral during the simulation and only offered commentary when expressly asked by the Admiral. "As you can see, Trinhes," I began, "humans and Krathen can work exceptionally well together." I struggled to keep the contempt out of my voice despite my best efforts. This had been our first chance to prove humanity could operate on a level field with the Krathen. The innovation in the new suit design had, after all, been conceived to protect humans more so than their co-pilot. New inertial dampeners had also been developed to prevent the more sensitive human anatomy from being turned to goo during high gravitational maneuvers. "So it seems," Trinhes responded dryly. "I require one of your ships for our engineers to study." "For what purpose?" I challenged suspiciously. Trinhes studied me carefully. "I wish to adapt your design for our fighters." I considered his response at length. I respected him for his honesty, but every instinct screamed to reject his demands. Before I could respond, however, I heard Shay consent to his demand. I shot her a questioning glance but did not move to undermine her. I would be lying if I said I did not feel betrayed by the act, but I had to trust her instincts. We left the observation deck to return to our personal shuttle. The moment the docking doors sealed behind us, I turned to Shay. "Why?" I asked bluntly. Her ears flattened at my accusatory tone, but she did not back down. "Because we have gotten this far because of him," she responded evenly. "And how many times are we going to just hand over technology when they demand it?" I shot back, frustration evident in my tone. Shay stared at me in silence, reading my expression and body language. Both radiated anger and betrayal. I could not hide my emotions from her. She had learned to read my moods with adept efficiency over the years. We had disagreed over many issues over the past couple of years, but I had never felt betrayed by her or as angered as I did now. "We need the military's continued support now more than ever," she explained patiently. "We will just have to adapt." "Adapt!" I shouted at her for the first time since we met. "I refuse to allow us to become servants to anyone, especially the military," I snapped. I stopped when I saw Shay's expression darken. Her ears remained flat, but she crossed her arms, and her tail became still apart from the agitated flick of the tip of her tail. I regarded her for several long minutes before letting out a pent-up sigh. "Fine," I said more calmly than I felt. I turned, keyed the airlock door with punctuated keystrokes, and left without another word. I found Lewis and Frey 2 bays over, discussing the results of the competition with the other teams. "Follow me," I growled to Lewis. "You and I are returning to base." "Sir?" "Free. See to it my family gets home when Shay is ready to leave." I did not wait for a response, and by the perplexed expression she shot back, she had several questions she wanted to ask. Lewis followed me onto the ship with a worried expression. "What's going on, sir?" "Suit up," I ordered with a growl. I was already pulling on one of the spare flight suits kept in the pilot locker. It was not a tailored uniform as the other pilots wore, but it would suit my purpose. Lewis did not ask any more questions, while he shrugged his arms back into the upper portion of his own outfit that had been tied around his waist minutes before. I slipped into the pilot's seat while still zipping up my own jumpsuit. No sooner had I dropped into the pilot chair than I began going through the complex starting sequence. The engines hummed to life with an increasing intensity as power built within the systems. I no longer struggled with the controls as I had months prior, my fingers dancing across the board with practiced efficiency. "Sir, we need a Krathen pilot," Lewis explained urgently as he donned his helmet and began the secondary system pre-flight checks. I chose to ignore his protests as I leaned over from my seat into the corridor locker and retrieved a backup helmet of my own. "Human pilot, override safety protocol. Gray 139, I ordered the ship's artificial intelligence." My heads-up display shifted in color from blue and gold to red and white. "Banshee 1 requests departure clearance." I spoke over the helmet comms unit. "You are not cleared for departure, Banshee 1, came the flight controller's response. "You have 3 seconds to open launch doors, or I will open them for you," I hissed in warning. Lewis began powering up the forward weapon system without question. "You are not." "3, I began calmly. "You are 2. 2. Stand by. 1. The blast doors began opening slowly. I toggled the forward throttle carefully in preparation. The momentum was barely noticeable were it not for the looming bay doors. The instant they parted enough for the ship to clear them, I punched the throttle. I could feel my suit begin making minor adjustments in response to the sudden pressure exerted on both Lewis and me. I jerked the controls and banked left the moment we were clear. My enhanced senses took in the tactical information that flooded my augmented control through my helmet visor. To the casual observer, I appeared to be dancing my fingers over an imaginary keyboard floating directly in front of me. "Engines operating at 73%, Lewis grunted through the internal communications. I gradually increased the engine power until the data display registered 100%. At our current rate of speed, we would reach Earth in 15 minutes. The external comms beeped. "Sir, communication from Shay," Lewis announced. I ignored him. A minute later, the proximity warning sounded. "Misfit 2 and 3 on approach." I acknowledged him but chose to ignore both the ships and the continued communication requests. I wanted to push the ship past its safety parameters, but they were in place largely because of the human factor. To bank hard at our current speed could prove dangerous for Lewis, and it would be unfair to subject him to the potentially lethal turns. We reached Earth 5 minutes before our gaining escort. Rather than decelerate to 50% power, I rolled the ship and dumped the power 30% before descending through the atmosphere. Warning lights flickered across the main screen as the thermal shields flared to life under the strain of atmospheric friction. The ship seemed to ignite as air molecules broke apart under the extreme compression, making the ship appear to be on fire. Anyone who happened to look up into the afternoon sky would be treated to what would look like a meteor crashing to Earth. The cabin began to heat despite the kinetic shielding, keeping them from disintegrating into a million atoms. "Shield integrity to 28%, came Lewis's deceptively calm report. 22%. The flames seemed to flicker out of existence once we were through the upper atmosphere. "We are clear, shields at 14%, he continued calmly. 5 minutes out." The hull continued to glow a soft orange as we touched down on the landing platform. Steam shrouded the ship from view as we were lowered into the ship hangar. I flipped the release from my helmet and removed it with a slow inhale of resignation. I reached out and placed a hand on Lewis's shoulder. "I'm sorry," I said solemnly. He said nothing, only nodded. Lewis was still running through the shutdown sequence when I stepped off the ship. I heard the other 2 ships descending to the awaiting platforms. I knew there would be repercussions for my behavior, but I really did not care. My anger still simmered beneath the surface, despite my resigned outer appearance. I returned to our room 10 minutes later and sealed the door behind me. Only 3 people in the compound could override my locking command. Shay, who was likely still on the ship. Hamble, but he was on a mission to recruit a scientist somewhere in Russia. And then there was Frey. I did not know if she would use her access or wait. I would find out soon enough. The door chimed several minutes later as I stood in the middle of the common room, trying to calm down. "Go away," I shouted. It chimed again, and I used all my strength to hurl the helmet I had been holding at the time. "I said go away," I roared. The helmet shattered into several smaller pieces on impact. In its wake was a deep dent where it had impacted. There were no more attempts to get me to open the door. I stood staring at the damage, no longer angry at Shay, but angry with myself for the way I had handled the situation. I emerged from my shower an hour later. My legs still felt like jelly, and I staggered like a drunk into the day room, wearing only my sleeping shorts. All the pent-up frustration from earlier was gone, leaving me exhausted and tired. I eyed the pieces of helmet and damaged door with regret. I began picking up the pieces scattered across the floor, lest anyone see them, most of all, Kiari. She would undoubtedly question the dented door, but there was little I could do about that. I deposited the pieces on the kitchen counter and staggered to the couch to lie down. Shay and Kiari had still not arrived by the time I woke up later that evening. A quick inquiry of my personal comm system showed they had not even left the ship. I let out a pent-up sigh as I left our rooms. Everything outside seemed to be operating as usual. Both Krathen and humans continued to work cohesively together. I found Lewis an hour later, arguing with Kars, who I thought had gone with Mercy. Both were pointing at a holographic ship design I had not seen before. The craft appeared to be nothing more than a fuselage built around 4 massive engines. The wings seemed a bit stubby, but bristled with oversized weapon systems. I stepped up beside Lewis without either seeming to notice my arrival. "What are the two of you arguing over?" Kars gestured to the cockpit in frustration. "The ship is overpowered. No single pilot can control it, much less a human." Lewis jumped as though something had bitten him. "Sir!" He took a moment to compose himself. "Sir, the technology is well on its way to completion that would protect the pilot." He flipped his hand through the image, and a small pod appeared. The ejection pod would prevent ablation as well as protect the pilot by using the inertia dampeners. I glanced from Lewis to Kars in confusion. "What is ablation?" "It is only the act of the body being torn apart by friction," Kars explained with a hint of sarcasm in his voice. "If we were dealing with a spacecraft, then yes, but not a fighter." "Could we not test it with a drone first?" I asked. I was well out of my depth concerning ship design science. Our current prototypes were barely capable of operating at just over Mach 10 while cruising. Without the current inertia dampener designs, the pilots would be killed or severely injured during acceleration or deceleration. What Lewis was proposing, while radical, would kill the pilot if something were to go wrong. "We could, but it would look like a meteor traveling through the atmosphere," Lewis conceded. "The fighter would have to automatically restrict speed within the atmosphere to prevent being destroyed by friction," Kars explained. "We could potentially reach 0.005% the speed of light with current technology in such a craft." "Around 11 hours from Earth to Mars," Lewis offered helpfully when he noticed my deer-in-the-headlights look. My brain was starting to ache at this point. The math involved was well beyond my own comprehension. Rather than continue with the explanation of physics, which would take me years to understand at my current rate of understanding, I excused myself to wander the compound and mull over more complex matters to which I found myself navigating. I attempted to contact Shay once I was well away from the compound and out of range of any prying ears, to no avail. Every attempt went unanswered. Even Frey ignored my communication attempts, which was unsettling. Shay and I's first major disagreement happened during a crucial time when we should have been standing together in unison. Instead, I had simply stormed out and recklessly piloted our most advanced fighter back to Earth. My thoughts were interrupted by my comms beeping at me. I answered before I even saw who it was, expecting Shay but seeing Chief Markham's face. "Sir, we have guests." His tone sounded ominous, but he offered no details. "I'm on my way," I responded flatly. I met Markham in the security room where he gestured to the main gate camera. 2 men in suits stood outside the gate, waiting patiently. "Feds," he said stoically. "They are requesting entrance." "Well, we couldn't hide forever," I exhaled in resignation. "Inform Frey and Hamble. I'll meet our guests at the perimeter gate." 2 of Hamble's men stood waiting next to a silver Suburban when I exited the building. The drive to the gate only took a few minutes. By all appearances, it was only myself and the 2 security personnel. In reality, dozens of security officers maneuvered in the shadows, along with drones hovering quietly overhead. I walked up to the inner fence that opened with a wave of my hand. The outer fence remained closed when I approached. "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" The lead agent withdrew his badge and showed it to me. "We are from the FBI. "We would like to speak to Mr. Mitchell." "I am Seth Mitchell," I answered. "What can I do for you?" I repeated. The agent glanced at his partner, who nodded. "May we come in to talk?" asked the lead agent politely enough. It was obvious he expected me to comply with his demand, no matter how he phrased it. I glanced around at the clear morning sky appreciatively. "It is a beautiful morning. We can talk here." I was about to say more, but the agent interrupted me. "Sir, we need to come in to talk. We have reports of unusual activity on your property." "What kind of unusual activity warrants a visit by the FBI?" I inquired pleasantly. "We can discuss that inside," he began, but I held up my hand. "You are not coming onto my property," I said patiently. I could make out the distant clap of thunder that heralded the re-entry of one of our ships. "If you would like to schedule a meeting at another time and at another location, I will be more than happy to appear, but not today." I turned to leave but stopped when the agent threatened me with a federal warrant. "Good luck with that," I said without turning. I walked back through the inner gate without acknowledging the two agents. "Scramble all government surveillance equipment directed toward us," I said once in the vehicle. "Expand border patrols to 3 miles."
Join us for more from Worlds Collide.